We will move on to item number 8, educational uses in Central Business District Survey. Questions? Gary Reedner.
Kick the bucket.
Yeah, I'm wondering.
No, we want to make sure you're here with us, Gary.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope the furniture survives the evening. You have before you tonight a draft survey that was prepared in response to City Council direction. This was talked about on May 21st, 2018. There were changes that the council approved to the zoning code, taking a table approach to uses allowed in different zones. In that discussion ensued regarding whether educational institutions should be allowed in the Central Business District zone. As you know, since 2005, there was a 200-student higher level educational institution, New St. Andrews College, approved for the Scatabo building adjacent to Friendship Square. There was also the purchase by New St. Andrews of a parking lot across Jackson Street that was purchased to provide parking that was part of the requirement in the conditional use permit issued by the city in 2005. Then, more recently, New St. Andrews College purchased the CJ's building on, I believe, A Street and First Street, and they intend to use that as a music concert hall, if you will, and received an additional authorization to have another 300 students in that building. During that same time, after that CUP was approved, and that CUP was approved with conditions relating to parking, which traditionally have been the biggest issues that have been an obstacle for educational institutions in the downtown. So the CJ's CUP was also issued by or approved by the council with some parking conditions attached to it. Immediately after that, within a month or two, Gritman Medical Center approached the city with an application for a CUP to house 40 WWAMI students, Washington, Alaska, Montana, Idaho, can't remember the other one. Wyoming, thank you very much. Medical students in the new Gritman office building. This was in response to an expanded WWAMI program that University of Idaho had cultivated, as well as Gritman Medical Center agreeing to lease space in the new office building to the WWAMI program. Be that as it may, even that is an educational use within the Central Business District requiring a CUP. That was also approved by the city, and so Gritman is providing that space. In August, Bill Belknap, August 20th, came back with a historical perspective, most of the information that I just gave you, but also historically based information on the genesis of and development of the zoning code, when educational institutions were first regulated, any conditions that have pertained to changes within the Central Business District, and the state of the zoning code as it is today. So based upon that, council members indicated that they desired more information in order to find out what the public's perception was of these educational uses in downtown. At that time, council gave direction that they wanted staff to put together a survey instrument that would be a statistically valid survey, that they wanted it to go out to the community at large in the similar way that we send out our biannual citizen survey. In other words, it is sent out to 1,200 randomly picked households. We hire a service to do that. We don't pick them. We don't hand pick them. So the survey would go out to them. The survey is supposed to have, as you see, it has some history as to the issue, an explanation of what a conditional use permit is, and the current conditional use permits that have been issued, the facilities they've been issued for, and any conditions that have been attached to the issuance of those conditional use permits. In addition, the council wanted to send this survey to every property owner and business owner operating within the Central Business District. So we brought a draft of this. Bill Belknap did seminal work working on it, did a great job of drafting it. Then he brought it over to administration, where we are responsible for producing the annual or biannual citizen survey and the biannual commission survey. So we went through it, analyzed the questions, and put them into a form that you're supposed to be given a yes or no choice with degrees in between. That's what makes it a statistically valid survey. There has to be a choice. So we took 2 questions and put them into one. If we hadn't have done that, somebody could say, well, I think it's a bad idea, and then the next question they could say, I think it's a good idea, and they would offset. We wouldn't find out what people thought. So we spent some time on that, brought it to Administrative Committee last week. There were some questions, I believe. Art wanted some additional detail on what conditional use permits were and when they would be issued. Brandy offered a suggestion regarding some vernacular in each of the questions so that the public would understand that these were CUPs were additional things that could be added to somebody who sought one of those permits. So with that, we brought this to you after that last draft, brought it to you for your approval so that we can start the process. Did receive an email today, Brandy, if you don't mind my bringing that up. There were a couple questions. One of the questions was the survey does not take into account the faculty that is staffing these institutions. And no, it does not. And I don't know if you did that, especially for the WWAMI program. Would you, any professor that were to teach a class or proctor anything, would they have to be added? So it really is pretty fluid. So that was not included. It was just considered to be just too fluid and unexact. There was also a question about the 540 student ceiling that we have now, current CUPs outstanding, are for FTEs. So somebody could be a half-time student, and that would make 2 bodies for 1 FTE. So again, this is one of those situations where it's impossible to predict that. I mean, you could take it down to quarter students and say, well, you're really talking about 2,300 students if they only took quarter classes, if you're just counting bodies. So we looked at FTEs as FTEs. Some of them may be half-time, but the bulk of them likely, at the University of Idaho at least, would be full-time. And we presume that New St. Andrews, being a 4-year institution, would also have that typically some similar demographic. So that's why we didn't break it down like that. Then again, you also add, the longer you make it, the more conditions you put in a survey, the more uncertain your responses are. Are they responding to one of the qualifiers, or are they responding to the actual question? So when we complete a survey instrument, we really try to get people to make a choice. Yes, I feel this way about something. No, I don't feel this way about something. Try to get the facts as close as we can, and then we get some amount of public opinion, so it'll help guide your deliberations. So with that, we'd ask for authorization to proceed with the survey.
Questions for Gary? One thing I got a question on, Gary, if these are accepted, when will these go out? You're
really out of my wheelhouse at this point, but I'm assuming that they would go out in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
And get back and data accomplished by the end of December type of a thing? Is that what you're
I would
looking at?
think it would be before that. We're talking about relatively fewer questions than we are in the citizen survey. One of the other things we didn't want to do, this is the year for the biannual citizen survey as well, and we didn't want to impact any of the potential responses to the citizen survey by this supplemental survey. So we would try to get this out. I think the citizen survey is due to get sent out sometime in mid to late October for receipt back around Thanksgiving. So we hope to miss those 2 time frames. So it'd be fairly quickly.
Okay. Catherine?
I really like the background information, and it is there that I have a question, and it's in the paragraph, at the very end, where it talks at the very last sentence, and it says, after this review process, the permit may be approved without any additional conditions approved, with additional conditions required of the applicant in order to use the location, or it may be denied. And I have a question about that. Have we ever denied any?
Conditional use
A
permit.
conditional use permit for an educational institution? I don't believe, in my experience, the only folks, the four that you see are the only four CUPs that I've seen brought forward. Bill, you probably have greater experience.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any conditional use permits for an educational institution that have been denied.
There has been, Catherine, conditional use permits that have been denied.
That didn't have anything to do with an educational institute, that was based on,
But usually, if the code's not right, then it becomes a variance. And those are usually denied. When I was on Board of Adjustment, I'm just kind of going back from my days, the 4 years I spent on it as a chair. But there was some things that made no sense and got fixed through P and Z, so on and so forth. So hope that helps answer your question.
Well, it does, and I just thought for clarification, we could just add, at this point, we've had no denials, because I think that's important, because at the question number 1, it asks if it should not be allowed within the central business district, but we actually have no precedent for that either.
But does that really matter?
Yeah, why would you ask that question?
Why does that have any bearing on people's feeling about whether or not
It's
educational
just,
institutions
part
should be
of
allowed?
background. It's not whether or not
No,
we
it's-
think it's relevant. It has to do with the history of the information.
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
Well, there's two ways of looking at that, too. If you put some information like that, and you said, well, these have never been,
Yeah, it may skew it.
they've never been disapproved, it'd be
That-
so, oh, okay, maybe it's okay just to go ahead and prove it if they might have a different opinion. I don't know if it's,
Yeah, it could be a prejudicial comment that none have ever been denied, which would imply to some people that it's a good thing and
Right.
prejudice their vote further on down.
Okay.
I know, Catherine, if you're in a, let me point something else out, Bill, and then we'll go over to Bill, but if you're on the Board of Adjustment, and you're actually looking at a conditional use permit, I can guarantee you, somebody would be a little bit angst if it was announced, well, none of these have ever been denied. And you have a group out there that might be opposed to it or whatever, it would almost kind of put them in a tough position saying, wow, we got to be the first ones to try to win the war on this thing. Bill, you had a comment?
I was just going to provide some clarification that the description about the conditional use permit process was not intended to be specific to educational institutions, just the CUP process as a whole. So it really wasn't meant to be directly related to applications for a conditional use permit for an educational institution, but just the general process. There's a public hearing, there's an opportunity for the board to consider potential impacts, and these are the actions that they can take upon the application. So it was not, but it was not intended to be specific to educational institutions.
So even though I know all that, reading this with that information leads me just to wondering if I was a regular citizen. That's all.